to Ethiopian foreign relations, foreign policies. So please Google him, you will find that he has already produced lots of materials. He is going to talk to us about a heated topic, which is the BRICS, and of course Africa. What are opportunities and challenges in moving forward? The floor is yours.
Okay. Welcome to this session. Actually, this is the past Pan-African Seminar Series collaboration with the African Studies Professional Association. So the topic of the seminar is the BRICS and Africa, political economic opportunities and challenges. These are the topic. So actually this paper was contributed for the course Power Politics and Development in Africa that was offered by Dr. Kirajo Kasa. So I'll start with the introduction. So the introduction is very brief, and as you can see, this study emphasizes on exploring, explaining, and analyzing the political economic opportunities emerging and challenges posed on Africa's overall development by examining the BRICS and Africa relationship. This is the introduction part. Then we start with the concepts that we clarify important concepts. Actually, the BRICS is an acronym. It is an acronym, as everyone is familiar with. It's all about Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And this organization represents over, for example, 40% of the global population. Its combined economic weight in 2015 equaled almost a third of the global GDP, and in purchasing power parity, PPP terms are roughly the same as the G7 what called country's economy. Actually, now in the last 2 years, it has almost exceeded the economic power of G7. So, what makes BRICS important is they are emerging as a new center of gravity in the international economic system. This is one. So, why is Africa important? As most of us know, Africa is the second populous continent in the world, with a land mass of like 30,244,049 square kilometers, having more than 1.1 billion population. And Africa is geographically divided into two major areas. One is the Northern Africa, the Maghreb region, and the Sub-Saharan Africa. Then, the next is, what is the objective of the study? What is it aiming at? What is it trying to somewhat come about academically in terms of intellectual outputs? So this study mainly emphasizes to answer the following two important research questions. What are the major political economic opportunities and challenges of the BRICS on Africa's development? So the emergence of BRICS has come up with challenges, at the same time it has come up with opportunities. When we say opportunities, these are political and economic opportunities, and the emergence of BRICS has also posed political challenges, political and economic challenges. And the second important issue, question which this research tries to answer is, what are the critical political economic policy recommendations African governments must adopt those on nurturing the opportunities emerging and mitigating the challenges posed in their overall interaction with the BRICS. So, with regard to methodology, in short, this qualitative methodology is being used. Important data from qualitative and quantitative sources of data has been tried to gather, and it's visible that this study is conducted. So, what are the overview of the major findings? So, the overview of the major findings begins with the brief explanation on the origin, emergence, and development of the BRICS. Actually, it was not BRICS at the beginning, it was BRIC, B-R-I-C, only. It was not BRICS at the beginning. So, the emergence of BRIC, for the first time, the term was coined by Goldman Sachs economist Jim O'Neill in 2001. And it's the composition of emerging economies and political powers at the regional and international level. So, what makes these powers important, specifically Russia, India, and China, these are oldest civilizations, a sort of oldest civilizations, sort of powers which were having a long history. That's one important aspect. So, these countries, BRIC at the beginning, Brazil, Russia, India, and China, They are important because of the following major factors. Number one, they are having the outstanding size of their economies. They are having big size of economy. Second, specifically in those periods from 2001 onward, there was stronger growth rates, leading to increasing significance in the world economy. And third one is these countries were mainly focusing on demand for a stronger political voice in international governance structures, which was extremely dominated by the West, specifically the so-called G7 and the West. So, concerning its emergence, the dialogue, BRIC, at the beginning, it has emerged through dialogue. There is dialogue specifically in 2006. The BRIC have sought to establish fair international governance more suitable to their national interests. Leaders held on 16 June 2009 in Yekaterinburg, Russia. So it has taken a long period since its inception in 2001 to the first conference in 2009. So it almost took like 9 consecutive years. So what is specific with regard to South Africa? Specifically with regard to South Africa has joined the group in 2001, 2011, and BRIC has transformed itself into BRICS, Brazil, Russia, China, and South Africa. So this is one of the defining developments in international politics in the past decade. Therefore, the emergence of BRICS is by itself another important, even in today's political context, specifically in the Russian-Ukraine conflict. This is also another important breakthrough in global political order. So, why is this step important? We have said that it's the BRICS-Africa relation. Therefore, why is Africa important in this context? So, we can say that Africa is what you call a Pandora box of paradox. On the one hand, it is resource rich, and on the other hand, it is extremely poor, the most poorest continent in the world. For example, when we try to see Africa's contribution in international trade with such huge resources and the population, it is only contributing 3% its participation is 3% in global trade. So, specifically, what makes Africa again important is its colonial legacy, its experience specifically of the Western domination and exploitation. So, since decolonization in the late 1950s up to 1970s, Africa was having very sort of stable political, economic growth. But the 1970s, specifically the 1970 oil crisis, and this the food production crisis in Africa, this has contributed on Africa's economy negatively. So what is the contribution of this? This further exposes Africa to be the victim of the Western political economy dominance. So the cumulative impact plunged Africa in the early 1980s into the deep economic crisis, which we know that has come up with the program called the Structural Adjustment Program. By the way, in the 1980s and in the 1990s, African states and African governments were somewhat being taken as a sort of a demo. For example, we can take, since the 1990s, the African state had become the most demonized social entity that is vilified for its weakness and overextension. Why? Patron-client relationship, patrimonialism, this has come with its colonial legacy. So, again, when we talk about Africa's economy, the African economy is based on what you call primary commodity production. And this primary commodity production has made Africa economically and politically to be an appendage of the West. Therefore, Africa is at the mercy of the West. Then, saying this one, then what are the political opportunities of BRICS Africa relation on Africa's economic development? So the emergence of BRIC as an institution, as a trading bloc, as an economic bloc, has come up with what you call very vital economic opportunities. Specifically, this has played an important role in African economic development. So the emergence of the BRICS after the financial crisis of 2007-2008, for Africa it was a blessing in disguise, because it has changed the structural dynamics of the West-dominated financial system by providing an alternative bypassing the normative structure. Therefore, it's not only the World Bank, it's not only the IMF, but for Africa, the emergence of BRICS has proven that there are other alternative economic institutions and economic alliances. So, BRICS has come with political and economic alternatives, choices and opportunities for Africa, in counterbalancing US and the Western by calling for more democratic and multipolar world order. So, as you guys know, as everybody knows, as academicians, as scholars, from 1990 onward, it was a unipolar hegemonic world structure. So the emergence of BRICS is, even as we can see nowadays, one of its political opportunity was to bring about what we call multipolar world order, where there are multiple power centers. So BRICS have continued countered Western influence in international institutions such as the United Nations, the World Bank, and the IMF, with the best global political inclusion of Africa. Therefore, the emergence of BRICS as an institution, the emergence of BRICS as an economic alliance, its advantage for Africa was being able to be included in the global political governance as much as possible. So the emergence of BRICS as a major global political economic actors has raised new hopes for win-win partnership that will foster the development of Africa. So when we see the West versus Africa economic relation, most of the time it was a zero-sum game economic relation. The West was a provider, and Africa has always to come up with what we call policies, initiatives, for example, structural adjustment program. We know that this economic liberalization, it was policy that was imposed by the West on Africa. But the emergence of BRICS has brought about a new opportunity for Africa to somewhat engage with other actors. So the BRICS specifically in terms of politics, again, the BRICS unveil an unwavering principle of non-interference and respect for national sovereignty. This is one of the most important elements as a political opportunity, because the West, for example, to come up with debt servicing or financial assistance or any sort of economic provision, always they came up with their own imposition. But with regard to the BRICS, what makes it unique as an institution was they were mainly focusing on non-intervention. They did not intervene in Africa's internal affairs. So another one is the BRICS countries have responded to geopolitical developments, especially their approach to the responsibility to protect. They are having a new policy called R2P. R2P means responsibility to protect. For example, the BRICS has played an important role in Libya's, in the crisis, in political crisis in Libya. For example, in internal crisis in Sudan, in Central African Republic, they have somewhat tried to thwart what's being imposed politically, economically, and militarily by the West. So this is the best political opportunity for Africa. Another one is, again, what makes BRICS important is provision of technical assistance and financial aid by the BRICS. Therefore, this will not attach with no any political or ideological preconditions or strings. For example, the West, whenever they try to provide economic, political, or any sort of assistance, they can use what you call strings. In the name of liberalism, in the name of democracy, for example, issues which are against African culture, like same-sex marriage, whatever. Even, for example, economic and political liberalization. In the name of economic liberalization, they somewhat make the role of African state to be minimized. So this is not the case with the BRICS. And the other important thing is, again, the BRICS, specifically technical assistance, development and technical assistance. The most important one is information communication technology, the Indians, the Brazil, India, China, in infrastructure development, airports, large telecommunication and digital and virtual infrastructures were built when this was having an impact on Africa's, specifically Africa is an agrarian economy, is having a huge transformation and political opportunity. So, for example, the expansion of this mobile networking infrastructure have made hundreds of millions of Africans to gain easy and fast access of political, economic, and social information. And these political advantages exposing the African political establishments for public scrutiny, where the African news has become highly indulged in the local, national, continental, and global politics. So BRICS recognized that IMF's model of growth, this is what we call the Washington Consensus, and specifically this structural adjustment program. The BRICS totally, what they did was they have somewhat openly downgraded the importance of this structural adjustment program. For example, this contributed the condemned this what you call structural adjustment program and a negative impact on African politics, on African economics, and on reimagining the role of the African state. And then for Africa, the increasing attention from the BRICS has generated a renewed interest from the continent's traditional Western trading colonial partners. The emergence of BRICS again is a blessing in disguise for Africa because the West, which was having the monopoly in manipulating African politics and economics, has been confronted with a rival. Therefore, BRICS was a rival for the West. Therefore, the West has started somewhat rethinking of how to engage with Africa. So the next one is the political challenges. So BRICS is not only coming with the political opportunities for Africa, but the emergence of BRICS and the BRICS Africa region was having what you call political challenge. So for example, the policy of non-interference in African politics, the political challenge it has created is it has made African leaders, specifically these authoritarian dictatorial leaders, to be free riders of the African political system. That's one. The other one is, even if the BRICS are contributed in the expansion of information communication technology, this digital and other infrastructures, this has been negatively used by the West in organizing what you call different springs and color revolutions. Actually, specifically in the northern part of Africa, we know what was happening in Tunisia, we know what was happening in what you call this Libya, in Egypt. So this has been used by the West negatively. Again, the BRICS Africa relation, the political challenge is this has tarnished domestic governance and administration. By the way, the BRICS Africa relation, specifically the relationship, when you see it from India, when you see it from Chinese perspective, what has happened in Zambia, in the Copper Belt, what is happening in the Democratic Republic of Congo, specifically the patron-client relationship, neo-patrimonialism, corruption, this has been negative impacts of what you call the BRICS Africa relation, because the BRICS countries, one way or the other, one of the most important methods they were using was trying to somewhat attract these African leaders and African ruling elite through corrective mechanism. The other one is the slowdown in BRICS economic growth. By the way, the growth of BRICS is having a political and economic opportunity. At the same time, what you call the slowdown of the BRICS economy is also having a negative impact. It is having a direct, what you call a direct relationship in African growth. Their slowdown economically is having a negative impact on Africa's economy. Why? Because Africa, as a result of its spillover effect on Africa's fragile economic structure and system, that mainly depends on the export of primary products in the global economic and market system. The BRICS, most of the time, they are commodity manufacturing states. Actually, now they are advanced. Of course, they are advanced, but most of the time, what they are trying to gain from Africa is primary products or these commodities. When the economic growth is slowing down, it's having an adverse or negative effect on Africa, specifically in terms of economics, but this economic negative impact is also having a political slowdown on Africa. The other one is the African states and governments related to their ex-colonial masters and their division along the membership of regional economic organizations. Even if BRICS is an opportunity, the African states are having what you call, for example, Francophone Africa, Anglophone Africa, again, the French West African colonies, the French East African colonies. These colonial divisions are having a negative impact on somewhat dividing Africans in their direct relation with the BRICS. Therefore, it was what you call negative impact, negative political. Then, and the other important political challenge is the intra-BRICS tension. As we know, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. These countries, the relationship with this alliance, it's having some sort of discomfort to them. It is directly effect on Africa. For example, in India, Narendra Modi, nationalist leader Narendra Modi, his accession to power. In Brazil, Bolsonaro's accession to power is having a negative impact on Africa because, for example, Bolsonaro's pro-Western attitude, again, negative relationship between China and India, specifically this border conflict. Again, the specific relation between military cooperation between Russia and India, on the other hand, this inter-institutional, what you call, negative relationship was destroying what you call having a negative impact on Africa-BRICS relation. The other one is, again, as we have said, the BRICS-Africa relation has an economic opportunity. What are these economic opportunities? The size of the BRICS economies, the economic potential, and the demand for stronger political voice on international platforms makes them particularly relevant to Africa's development. So, as we have said, having more than huge population, 40% of population, this is a market for Africa. This is an economic opportunity if Africans are supposed to use it properly. Again, their attachment with the BRICS, it's having an economic voice in major financial and what's called development institutions at the global level. Therefore, Africa can challenge or counterbalance and reject a series of unacceptable Western practices for subordinating the third world through imposition. So the emergence of BRICS is having such an impact. It's a positive, what you call it, it's an opportunity. It's not only with the West, it's not only with the IMF, or it's not only with the World Bank, but the emergence of BRICS has gave Africans another opportunity. And this is what we are witnessing nowadays. Now, more than 24 or some countries are applying to be members of what you call the BRICS. Another one is resource efficiency can be adopted for the management of wealth and resources for the greater benefit of people, ecosystems, and services. And another one is building strong institutional frameworks, establishing financial institutions, and enabling policies that spur economic growth and lead Africa to sustainable economic development. So, the BRICS has come with a new bank, which was not only counterbalancing, but huge and bigger than the new development bank, having more than 100 billion US capital. That is another opportunity for Africa. Again, the BRICS has come with an option, economic option called de-dollarization. And they come with a new BRICS currency called CRA, Contingent Reserve Agreement. So, it's global. So, this is having a positive impact economically and politically.
انتوا اللي نكتب
So, the most important economic opportunity of BRICS for Africa is the emergence of alternative financial institutions. It's not only Africa must not only depend on
So, good. Just continue. See the time.
So Africa must not only should have to fix its eyes not only on IMF and World Bank, but the new development bank was established by BRICS, having a lending capacity of more than $100 billion. By the way, IMF's and World Bank lending capacity is $60 billion, and it's based on the interest of the Americans. But this new development bank, it can lend or borrow African countries without any limit. So this was a huge opportunity, and at the same time, de-dollarization, which Americans were using, specifically dollar was used as an economic and political Americans by imposing different sanctions. For example, Americans come with a sanction called CATSA, countering American adversaries through sanctions acts. For example, de-dollarization has an impact on overriding such negative impacts for Africa. Therefore, the BRICS has come with what you call are a contingent reserve agreement. It is based on purely pegging. For example, you can take 1 gram of gold is 5,000 rupees. So this has a huge positive impact on shifting from petro-dollar to what we call commodity-based economic relation. The other one is the BRICS share in FDI, foreign direct investment in world stock, and foreign direct investment inflows to Africa reached 34%, 14% and 25%. And this tells you that as a result of the relationship between the BRICS and Africa, the foreign direct investment is increasing from time to time. And even the trading partnership between these two, African continent on one hand, and the BRICS on the other is increasing over time. Therefore, trade between the BRICS and Africa was as much as US $340 billion, 10 times higher than the value recorded in 2002. You can see how in 10 years' time, how successful economic interaction and growth is existing between these two entities. Most importantly, BRICS has been able to provide an alternative platform to the West-dominated international order with the new development bank, NADB, which I explained earlier. The establishment of the BRICS NADB market, a milestone in BRICS African cooperation. So Africa, which was traditionally and for the longer period of time been relying on the World Bank and the IMF, now has got an alternative financial institution. So without any economic and political position. The other one is BRICS commitment in the eradication of extreme poverty and hunger is a moral, social, political, and economic imperative of humankind. For example, you can take the best example, and this is India. For example, in India, whatever happens, whatever man-made or natural disaster happen, hunger comes, the Indian government can feed its people for 8 consecutive years without looking for any aid from any other country. So Africans have to learn some sort of important lesson from this one. Then, it's not only economic opportunities. Opportunities are always having challenges, and opportunities and challenges are the two sides of a single coin. So, what are the economic challenges this BRICS Africa relation poses on Africa? So, the BRICS unconditional provision of loans, which the Africans has to be careful. The BRICS unconditional provision of loans and credits have to be considered seriously in such global political and economic turmoil, where African states could be collaterals, they will be collaterals in the long term, making them easy prey for the new form of colonialism through the dumping of the BRICS products and undermining the development needs of their people. So this has to be taken into account. For example, Shamwa. For example, if you go to Shamwa, other important African dresses which were produced in West Africa now are being taken in China. Therefore, it's not only a blessing, but we should have to see also as an academicians, intellectuals, and policymakers the wrong side and negative impacts of this economic relation. Unless and otherwise Africa takes proper measures, relying on cautiously integrated strategic economic policies, which guarantees its industrialization by increasing its market share in the international commerce and trade, the continent's relation with the BRICS cannot be taken as a guarantee of its development. So, not only, for example, Africans may think that easy access of raw materials, exporting raw materials to China and the BRICS as something, what you call, an opportunity, but it is also having a negative impact. Focusing on exporting primary products, on the other hand, is having a deindustrialization impact. And Africa should have to focus on its industrialization too. Should have to learn mechanisms on how to transform the African economy from primary goods producers to manufacturing economy. The other one is the local currencies of BRICS. Actually, this was like in the last, before the Russia-Ukraine war, but in the, before the Russia-Ukraine war, the local currencies of BRICS were somewhat swaggering based on their attachment to the American dollar and the Western economy. But this one, with the exception of China, has experienced varying levels of volatility following the onset of global economic crisis. But thanks for Russia nowadays, Brazil, and as a result of this de-dollarization, and specifically economics based on pegging, this financial exchange system based on monetary exchange system based on pegging has an impact for Africa positively. But still, again, Africans have to be careful on how to deal with such exchange mechanisms with the BRICS currencies. Finally, BRICS Africa relation has created not only very profound economic opportunities for the continent, but also posed critical economic challenges on Africa's economic development. When examined from the perspective of what's taking place in the global economy, economic slump and slowdown that adversely affected the advanced and emerging economies, including the BRICS. So these issues were the previous, but what we should have to consider specifically on the current contemporary, on the most recent issues is the Russia-Ukraine war, the Russia-Ukraine war, or Russia's special military operation in Ukraine has come up with, for BRICS, as a huge positive alternative. BRICS are positive alternatives for African analysis. We have seen their strengths, we have seen how there is an emerging multipolar order. So this has to be taken into account. Then conclusions and recommendations. So for Africa, the increasing attention from the BRICS has both prospects and challenges on the continent's political economy, and at the same time it also generated the renewed interest from the continent's traditional Western trading partners, out of fear of losing their long-held strategic and economic interests in Africa to the new rising southern powers. So Africans should have to be careful. It's not only a blessing in disguise, the emergence of BRICS, but the Western system, the Western political economic system, this colonial mentality, always is what is a spirit that is hidden in the dark. So Africans should have to be careful on this aspect. However, there exists a great deal of apprehension on the part of many African states. Of course, when we see specifically in the last 20-some years what the Indians, what the Russians, specifically what the Chinese has contributed in African development is huge, irrespective of the amount of debt which Africans are incurring. It's in comparison with the West, it is an advantage, but again, we should have to be careful on this aspect too. So, as a recommendation for Africa to achieve both political and economic long-term development in a balanced, mutually independent and respective global political and economic relationship, this study has made the following recommendations. So, number one, the African states have to put their houses in order, meaning that the African leaders, the consecutive African governments have not taken any serious lesson from what was the relation with the West. So we should have to keep our houses, their homes in order, specifically in formulating and adopting vital political and economic policies, plus strategies by enacting mutually applicable laws for both sides. For example, what we see is Chinese investors, with regard to human rights abuses, with regard to corruption, with other mismanagement of environment, this has been ignored by African leaders, but Africans and African leaders and Africans in general should have to give an attention on this one. The African states have to strive to achieve economic growth and technological change, which are accompanied by what the great economist Joseph Schumpeter called creative destruction. So creative destruction means it is taken from Asenabro and Robinson's book, this Why Nations Fail, the origins of power, prosperity, and poverty. So creative destruction means Africans should have to somewhat forget the old system and come up with a new system of adopting their political economy with the BRICS. The other one is the African governments must avoid making the same mistakes of political economy dependency of the past. Again, even if the big Africa relation looks positive, if Africans are focusing on the traditional dependency-based attitude, then again this is a disaster. So what we should have to do is specifically Africans separately and continentally in the international political economy with the developed countries and others should have to balance the relationship with the West and not only focusing on what you call these BRICS. So, continentalism can be achieved by the African states, governments, ruling elites, academicians, and professionals must vigorously work on adopting, developing the best experiences, practices, policies, and strategies of political, economic, and social development from the BRICS. So we should have to take basic lessons. Rather than copying and pasting their policies, we should have to adapt and indigenize the good lessons we have taken from the BRICS into our context, in African context. Otherwise, if you're trying to copy and paste, then this doesn't work. Therefore, it's not that the issue of political economic development in Africa must not be only those of the elites, the so-called ruling elites, but African professionals, academicians, and those who are the people in the ruling and civil society should have to work on hard on bringing about important change. For example, we should have to decolonize African educational system. Epistemological decolonization, epistemological de-link, but it must not be spontaneous, it must not be what you call emotional, but rather it has to be scientific, based on scientific, you have to do that one. Then the last one is the African states have to strengthen their unity. Kwame Nkrumah's dream of politically and economically united Africa in the fight to have permanent representation in the critical and dominant organs of the United Nations, such as the Security Council. So, in this aspect, the BRICS can play an important role in somewhat guaranteeing Africa to have a place, specifically in the UN Security Council. The UN Security Council, at least the two, specifically the French and the Britain are one of the most dominant colonial powers, which have robbed Africa for the last since slavery. So Africa should have to have position, permanent position. So this is important, and other international financial and economic organizations. For example, for how long Africa and its leadership has to be subservient to the demand and interest of the West, specifically the World Bank and the IMF. For how long Africa is supposed to be the guinea pig in experimenting non-working or what you call unwanted political and economic policy of the West. So for Africans, in collaboration with the BRICS, should have to come up with a new mechanism of advancing this continent. Thank you very much, and this is what I'm having.
You said that there are challenges among the BRICS themselves. For instance, Modi, himself is just more inclined to the US. Plus, he's polarizing the BRICS themselves among the Russia and between Russia and China. Could you just brief us more on that? Just would you make it clear? I'm not just understanding how he's trying to polarize between these two powers within the BRIC itself. The other thing is, when we see the geographical diversity of the BRICS itself, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, they are just geographically distributed. Plus, what's added to this is quote unquote the inefficiency of the United Nations itself. The perception among most African people, most the agents of Africa actually, is that the UN has already become the instrument of the US in particular and the West in general. So with this perception and with the geographic distribution of the BRICS plus the economy, the aggregate economy of the big countries, the population size and so on. Do you think any prospect of expanding in size of the BRIC countries from BRICS to? Do you think will it attract more countries to it, and will it take over some of the roles of the UN? It could stand as a rivalry to the UN. I think I just make it somewhat complicated, but I'm trying this specifically. Would it stand as rivalry entity to the UN body?
Okay, so the participants are like handful, so let me answer your questions. Then I'll proceed to the next issue. So, polarizing, yeah, as I've said, one of the major challenges, political challenges, which is having an economic repercussion on Africa, this relation is the polarization in the intra-Greek politics. So, it is a very paradox. When we talk about BRICS, it is a very paradox, except the two. Brazil is in Latin America and South Africa. But the other three are almost never switching. Russia, China, and India are almost talking. So, BRICS can be polarized, and it was polarized. For example, nationalist leaders like Narendra Modi, conservative leaders like Bolsonaro of Brazil, they were serving the interests of the West. The way the West is trying to overtly and covertly it's trying to somewhat not only polarize but try to break the so-called BRICS. For example, we can take China and India are having this border dispute. And on the other hand, India's alliance with AUKUS, the new alliance called AUKUS, Australia, United Kingdom, and United States. By the way, this will not only polarize India and China, but this is also having a negative impact on China, on Russia-India relations. Therefore, of course, there is a polarization. But this BRICS as an entity is, the luck is with the political luck is with it. For example, when you take Brazil, Lula da Silva is coming. Therefore, at least to make it may minimize the friction. So there is a polarizing element. Polarizing elements are there. But the leaders, specifically the leaders, Xi Jinping, whether we like it or not, the new world order has already emerged. Whether the West likes it or not, in political science, there is a theory called hegemony. Any hegemonic power, it has its own capital. It's like the economic, what you call it's like the economic, this diagram. Hegemonic power will rise and fall down. And the American hegemony is rising and falling down. Of course, even there are assumptions that dollar will be useless after 5 years. But on the other hand, their huge economy, their huge interest in global politics and economics is also making them closer. For example, India is the third largest military power in the world. Almost, its military import more than 50% is for Russia. Even if they are polarizing with each other, at the same time they just need to with each other very, very closely. So even in today's crisis, China and India are the largest importers of water for Russian water, which they are selling, buying with huge discount, but directly providing this to the markets of the West. Even if there is polarizing, beyond the polarization, what makes them coming closer, the issues coming bringing them closer is huge. There are facts on this one. The other one, of course, actually the BRICS, in the last, specifically after this, the Russia's military operation since February, the BRICS, this is blessing incidents for the BRICS. BRICS, for example, in the last 2-3 days, when we are supposed to look into mainstream media, more than 24 countries are applying to join BRICS. For example, Mexico itself, Saudi Arabia itself, Iran, even Algeria. These are hugely oil exporting important countries. For example, simply you can take even Russia and China. They are the largest producers of strategic metals. There is what's called strategic metals, which are very important in the defense industry, in the aviation, in space, in this is the microprocessor chips production. So, whether we like it or not, BRICS is expanding without changing its names. I'm sure that they don't add any other extra acronym or word, but with the BRICS, as an umbrella, new states are trying to join. For example, in the last 2-3 weeks, Indonesia is de-dollarizing. And whether the Americans like it or not, petrodollar is sinking down. Because Saudi Arabia itself is applying to join BRICS, and rather than petroleum for dollar, the Saudis are doing yuan for petroleum. But we should have to be clear, it's not as such easy to replace the United Nations, even if it is an instrument of the West collectively, because its headquarters is in the United States of America. The largest budget is allocated by the United States of America. A repercussion on the UN, for example, 20, for example, the UN itself. For example, rather than asking to permanently represent the United Nations Security Council, it is not as such huge, it's not as such easy political outcome. It's not as such easy political challenge for the West, but it's important. So, BRICS will never simply replace the United Nations. This is an establishment having its roots since the end of the war, from the League of Nations to today. But I would expect, and the trends what we see today shows, that even if the United Nations is there and being used as an instrument of the United States and the collective West, challenges are emerging, for example, by China, Russia, for example, with regard to veto powers. They are trying to block multiple Western initiatives in the United Nations Security Council. So I'm sure that it will not replace it as such easy. And of course, rivalry will exist. For example, the United Nations Security Council, one of its responsibilities is securing global peace and security. This order and so forth. But the BRICS, for example, you can take the combined military power of the three. India, China, and Russia is much more larger than what you call the so-called NATO. Much more larger than the so-called NATO. Therefore, in terms of peacekeeping, in terms of security, provision of security, in terms of avoiding regime change, what the West called liberalization, but regime change, this can be somewhat blocked and challenged by the BRICS. But it's not as such easy to take overnight or replace United Nations as such. It's not easy. Have I answered the question? I'm not exactly.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, next question.
Presentation, but the center I think should have asked masters and PhD students to attend the seminar because they could have benefited a lot, in my opinion. And it's also very sad even not to see staff members from the center. When a PhD student from the center is presenting a seminar, this is a trend in the university, not just in the center. But that's, I think we have to work on this. It's not only the center, but other departments do not organize seminars in the first place, and when others organize seminars like this, they don't send students, and staff members themselves do not appear. In other universities, it is not like this. In universities that we know some universities abroad in Africa and Europe, so it's very sad really. So I think the department, the center should think about this matter. I think it's a good presentation. I think it's a good paper. But just to raise some pointers, you could include, for example, some kind of historical discussion, background, why these countries decided to come together in the first place in your paper. It will give you the historical context, why the four countries have come together. What factors, what historical factors motivates them to come together? Things like this. If you, I think that will add, in my opinion, to your paper. That being said, you told us, you suggested in your paper, with the emergence, with the creation of BRICS, you are saying that a multipolar world order is emerging. But there are some claims, some reporters, that China, United States dominated global order, bipolar global order, is emerging, some say. So how do you view this kind of debate? Then another question. Can we say, specifically you have discussed BRICS and Africa, can we say that specific BRICS countries have similar policies towards Africa? Have they? I think you should explore. I hope you will tell us something on this point. But if they don't have similar policies towards Africa, so what are the differences and the similarities that specific BRICS countries pursue in Africa? That's the second question. The third question I have is, my fear is, while I also share your opinion, your position that it may appear, the BRICS may appear as an alternative from the so-called Western dominance, can't we also suspect that this would emerge as another group that wants to dominate Africa particularly. Can we say, I mean, I sense sometimes like a change of masters. You had Africa had Western masters, that's obvious, but now new masters. The fact that a slave changes its master does not emancipate the slave. So you can tell us something in this. I think that let me put add one point, maybe a remark, but you have mentioned it, which I think is also good. These countries, the BRICS countries, China and Russia, they have different political systems, as we know. The fact that they are not homogeneous, I don't see it as a problem as long as they agree on certain policies. But my fear is they provide finance, support, lending, and so forth to irresponsible and corrupt African regions. Thank you very much.
So, thank you very much. Actually, historical background, as I said, historical background, historical motivations. And the problem most of the time, as we privately discuss, usually papers are missing, otherwise they are supposed to be contributed as a soft copy of hard copy prior to what you call such seminars, creates some sort of confusion. Because historical backgrounds and things are there, but as a result of the time limit that I'm having, I'm not going to do that. But I've tried to somewhat mention these issues. For example, what makes historical governments, what motivates them? Let's take, for example, Russia, China, and India. These are specifically China and India. These are oldest civilizations. Oldest civilizations. These were great powers before America and the West were great powers. One is that. The other one is specifically after the end of the Cold War, the emergence of this unipolar world order. And it's the beginning of Brzezinski. I think this is the material which he gave me, the beginning of Brzezinski's book. The rise of these BRICS is always attached with specifically the 2007-2008 economic crisis. The 2007-2008 economic crisis that has started from New York and somewhat end in Tokyo. So it is the emergence of these countries, specifically the foreign reserve they are having. By the way, there are serious political issues. For example, when Americans were fighting in Iraq, they were borrowing every day, like $10 billion per day. They were borrowing every day from the Chinese and other these huge foreign reserve assets. That has brought economic crisis in 2007 and 2008. But that is what even Brzezinski openly said, the emergence of these countries simply shows us that there is power struggle or a new emerging power. That's the first manifesting itself economically, then gradually into political aspect. So the dominance of the West, specifically in the name of this G7, at the same time, the historical grudge these countries, specifically China and India, even Russia, after the collapse of USSR, the political grudge they are having themselves. This is a motivating factor. Therefore, by collapsing or coming together their political and economic assets, what they try to do is now openly doing is confronting the West. So the historical, as you have said, historically there are multiple political and economic factors. For example, you can take the Chinese, you can take the Russians, even the Indians. They are not that much interested as states, as political systems. They are not interested to accept the Western position anymore, and that's what they are doing. And they are almost successful on this. As you have said, of course, now China is number one economy. It's because the West is controlling the mainstream media, the digital media, and the other media platforms. Still, Americans are telling us that it's the number one economy. But when we see through purchasing power parities, when we see with different economic indices which are indicating growth and development, the Chinese economy is the number one economy nowadays. The American economy is having more than $34 trillion debt. So, but it's not a bipolar order. Now, the global order is not only based on politics and economics, military is also another important aspect. So, for example, huge economy, that's important, even to the West itself, the importance of Russia. Even now, the sanction to Iran, the importance of sanction to Iran is not as such easy. Therefore, there are forces which are coming together on the other side. So, even when you see the relationship between China and Russia, it is mutual, based on mutual respect and some sort of balancing attitude.
You should say Russia, not Russia.
Yeah, Russia, okay, I will call it Russia. So, saying that one, therefore, I don't think it's bipolar order. And it's mentioned. And others, even, for example, Jeffrey Sachs, Professor Jeffrey Sachs, in the last 2-3 days was having a lecture in New York, and he was openly claiming that the unipolar world order is over, and there is a bipolar world order is emerging. So, for example, when you see what Russians are doing in Syria, how they are somewhat making that particular Assad's government, which was attacked by the coalition from more than 60 countries, Russians are somewhat supported and contributed. So there are now emerging powers. Even there is a shift, for example, the traditional allies with the United States and the West, like Saudi Arabia, the Gulf countries, and these oil-rich countries, they are turning their face towards the East. Therefore, there is an emergence of what you call a new world order. I'm sure that this income, by the way, it's not the West plus EU plus NATO on the one hand, we can call it bipolar. China, Russia, even Iran plus North Korea on the other side. This can take us another what you call power center in the global political, economic, and what you call strategic relations. This is my answer. Can we say, for example, BRICS have similar policies in Africa? As an institution, it may have, but as individual countries may not have, for example. What are the Brazilians are looking for? For example, let's take China. For example, the Chinese government is having a plan of settling more than 4 million Chinese in Angola. Because Angola is oil rich, diamond rich, and a very rich country. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, we can see it's not Brazilians, but the Chinese are having an open vendor, openly buying gold and strategic minerals on the open market and selling arms. Collectively, as an institution, BRICS may have the same policy, but individually, for example, Indians, in the provision of scholarship, in the provision of specifically in the information communication technology, they are having their own interests. So, as an institution, they may have what you call common policy, BRICS as itself. For example, combining together, they can confront the West in Africa. They can confront the West in Africa. As a combined force, they can confront the West. But individually, for example, you can take Russia again. How Russia is misplacing the French from the Western colony. For example, with military mercenary group from the Wagner, direct and indirect, implicit and explicit support of regimes in West Africa. Therefore, collectively together as one, and individually as states by themselves, they are having their own interests. So, as an institution, maybe they have similar policies. Of course, there's a BRICS document. In 2017, 2018, they are having their own documents with regard to Africa, even plans and strategies and so forth. But individually, for example, the Brazilians, they have their own interests from Africa, separate interests. Even this separate interests is having what you call an individual confrontation among the BRICS themselves. So let's take, for example, in terms of geopolitical military strategy, the Chinese are having a military base in Djibouti. And the Russians also are interested in having their own military base either in Missouri, Assad, or in Port Sudan. These countries, if they are having what you call an aggregated interest as a group, there is also the same way what's taking place in NATO and the West. That's what we see. By the way, the comparative analysis can be done. The EU and NATO, without making any question, without asking any question, they are simply blindfoldedly following the American foreign policy in Ukraine. But whatever happens, they are talking in the name of NATO and the West. So the same thing will happen here, I'm sure. And as I've said earlier, I've said, yes, and my recommendation, Africans has to be cautious enough with regard to the BRICS too. That's why we should have to take a lesson. What was happening beginning from the slave trade of the 15th century to African colonization in the last centuries of the 20th century, in the 1950s, 60s, we should have to take a lesson. And BRICS, I'm saying, and I'll openly say, of course, it may be a change of masters, unless and otherwise Africans should.
Related to Ethiopian foreign relations, foreign policies. So please Google him, you will find that he has already produced lots of materials. He is going to talk to us about a heated topic, which is the BRICS, and of course Africa, what are opportunities and challenges in moving forward. The floor is yours.
Okay. Welcome to this session. Actually, this is the past Pan-African Seminar Series collaboration with the African States Professional Association. So the topic of the seminar is the BRICS and Africa, political economic opportunities and challenges. These are the topic. So actually this paper was contributed for the course Power Politics and Development in Africa that was offered by Dr. Kirajo Kasa. So I'll start with the introduction. So the introduction is very brief, and as you can see, this study emphasizes on exploring, explaining, and analyzing the political economic opportunities emerging and challenges posed on Africa's overall development by examining the BRICS and Africa relation. This is the introduction part. Then we start with the concepts, the clarifying important concepts. Actually, the BRICS is an acronym. It is an acronym. As everyone is familiar with, it's all about Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And this organization represents over, for example, 40% of the global population. Its combined economic weight in 2015 equal almost a third of the global GDP, and in purchasing power parity, PPP terms, or roughly the same as the G7, what we call country's economy. Actually now, in the last 2 years, it has almost exceeded the economic power of G7. So, what makes BRICS important is they are emerging as a new center of gravity in the international economic system. This is one. So why is Africa important? As most of us know, Africa is the second populous continent in the world, with a land mass of like 30,244,049 square kilometers, having more than 1.1 billion population. And Africa is geographically divided into two major areas. One is the Northern Africa, the Maghreb region, and the Sub-Saharan Africa. Then the next is, what is the objective of the study? What is it aiming at? What is it trying to somewhat come about academically in terms of intellectual outputs? So this study mainly emphasizes to answer the following two important research questions. What are the major political economic opportunities and challenges of the BRICS on Africa's development? So the emergence of BRICS has come up with challenges, at the same time it has come up with opportunities. When we say opportunities, these are political and economic opportunities, and the emergence of BRICS has also posed political challenges, political and economic challenges. And the second important issue, question which this research tries to answer is, what are the critical political economic policy recommendations African governments must adopt those on nurturing the opportunities emerging and mitigating the challenges posed in their overall interaction with the BRICS. So with regard to methodology, in short, it is qualitative methodologies being used. Important data from qualitative and quantitative sources of data has been tried to gather, and it's based on that these studies conducted. So what are the overview of the major findings? So the overview of the major findings begins with the brief explanation on the origin, emergence, and development of the BRICS. Actually, it was not BRICS at the beginning, it was BRIC, B-R-I-C only. It was not BRICS at the beginning. So the emergence of BRIC, for the first time, the term was coined by Goldman Sachs economist Jim O'Neill in 2001. And it's the composition of emerging economies and political powers at the regional and international level. So, what makes these powers important, specifically Russia, India, and China, these are oldest civilizations, a sort of oldest civilizations, sort of powers which were having a long history. That's one important aspect. So, these countries, BRIC at the beginning, Brazil, Russia, India, and China, they are important because of the following major factors. Number one, they are having the outstanding size of their economies. They are having big size of economy. Second, specifically in those periods from 2001 onward, there was strong growth rates leading to increasing significance in world economy. And third one is these countries were mainly focusing on demand for a stronger political voice in international governance structures, which was extremely dominated by the West, specifically so-called G7 and the West. So, concerning its emergence, the dialogue, BRIC, at the beginning, it has emerged through dialogue. And this dialogue, specifically in 2006, the BRIC have sought to establish fair international governance more suitable to their national interests.